Hello and welcome back to another Island 54 development stream. I'm building a survival crafting MMO, and in my last stream I got inventory working on the server side. So when somebody picks up a piece of terrain scatter, like a stone or something like that, then it actually disappears for all the other players. The server knows what's in each player's inventory, and then when they put it down, it will appear again for other players. Now, there's a lot of inefficiencies in the way that the data is being sent from the server to the client. On every single frame, it's sending every single entity within a certain range. Welcome back, a random guy. So I mentioned in other streams that I've been working on an improved piece of netcode. And so today I'll be going over that. I'll be starting out by writing some unit tests. I've got my first two really silly tests here, and making sure that it's all working, finishing off a few bits that I haven't finished in the implementation, and then integrating it into my existing UDP transmitter so that we don't get quite so many packets being sent. Not sure if I'll get to it, it's a fair bit of work, but if I do get through all of that, then I will start working on other bits of the protocol I've been promising I'd be doing around clients and servers acknowledging each of the messages that they receive. And that will again allow things like commands to be properly deleted and just generally reduce the amount of processing being done. So we'll see how we go with getting through all of this stuff. Now I just need to make sure that Restream says we are live. It does say we're live on both YouTube and Twitch. Excellent. Sorry, just need to... You're working on your game right now too, a random guy? Excellent. So, to explain how this is going to work, this is as much a recap for me as anything. I have this client game state. This is going to get stored for every single live session. Now, this is a large object. Just don't expect this to be a tiny thing. And be aware that this is a fairly expensive object, because every single time we need to send a packet out to a client, we need to pull the client game state for that session off some server. We'll get into that in a moment, so that we know what the client can see and work out what we need to send to the client. So you're going to see a lot of data being transmitted around in this object and around this object. The main thing that this class stores is the client state. This is indexed by chunk, and it contains just a list of entities within each of those chunks. I'm not convinced that storing it by chunk, indexing it by chunk is the correct thing to do yet, but I'll find that out as I flesh out this implementation. We also store a list of pending message IDs. This will be used when a client acknowledges a packet. We need to know not only which packet we can forget about and stop sending, but we also need to know all the previous packets, because the way my protocol works, we just keep on sending data over and over and over again until the client acknowledges it. And we keep on appending to that data until the client acknowledges it. So if the client skips a bunch of packets and then acknowledges a packet, we want to assume that that packet and all the ones before it have been acknowledged, because they contain the later packet contains all of the earlier information. We also have a list, obviously, not just of the IDs, this is to keep ordering, but we also have a list of the full messages. And this allows us, when a client acknowledges a packet, to actually take the message that we know we sent as part of that message ID and apply it. Because this is basically a diff. This is a delta between what we think the client has and what we want the client to have. So we can take this as a diff and apply it on top of what we think their state is. So that allows us to update the client state. And then lastly, because we know that we might be sending through too much data, because whenever the player is moving around, they'll be loading trees and stones and all sorts of things off in the distance. I've got this other object, which is just a list of the chunks that we have invalidated. Now, when we invalidate a chunk and the client goes off and acknowledges it, we need to know, welcome back, Osleth. When the client acknowledges the packets, we need to know which version of a particular chunk they fetched the entities for. Because remember, I'm able to get the client to fetch entities within a chunk through a side channel, and these are not versioned. So with a number of assumptions, which is the client will fetch the entity after we send the invalidation, and we know that they have received the data before they send back the acknowledgement. So we've got a window of time that we know that this is valid for. So what we do is we actually, whenever we send out an invalidation, we take a copy of the entities that are in that chunk that we're invalidating and literally store those against the against a chunk invalidation ID. And then when the client acknowledges that, we know that they have a version of that data no older than the version of data held against this. So these are fairly big objects themselves. They store the chunk that's being invalidated, whether or not the server told them to only do static entities, and again, a full version of the data indexed by message ID. So there is going to be a huge amount of data in these state trees. But I'm expecting these to be very, very fast to fetch out of, it will be Redis that I'll be fetching them out of, and quite quick to generate the diffs and get those packets out to the client. If I'm wrong, then I'm going to have to redesign this and find another way of doing it. But I've got a fair bit of confidence that this code will be fairly fast. Okay, so in terms of the actual API, there are not too many things. I've only implemented one of the methods so far. We've got this process acknowledgements. So this is just the code that will go and acknowledge any data that was sent in a message. It will go through and apply any invalidations that the client has acknowledged. And lastly, it will remove any messages. So this is just a cleanup step. So we can actually not keep on storing our copies of the data forever. And so the data is fairly small. Well, it's okay, it's not tiny. It's longer than I realized. But I'm going to need another method on here, which is this class, as well as handling acknowledgements from the client, is going to need to get told when, well, it needs to get passed a copy of what we want the client state to be. So this is going to be just a big list of entities, or maybe an index of entities by chunk. And it will then use that to generate the diffs and update all of its data and generate packets to go out to the client. I don't know exactly what that will look like yet. Let's do a generate message. This will take some sort of a list of entities. So let's just give it a straight entity list for now. And this can do all of the indexing and everything else. And this will generate a server message and obviously cause all sorts of updates to its internal state. Yes, and we're just not returning anything at the moment. Excellent. All right, so I'll leave that compiler in there. Oh, well, I need to fix it, otherwise my tests won't work. Okay. So I have these other two files. The one that matters here is generate delta. So the generate delta function, it's a fairly large function, will take two entities, which could be undefined, and it will actually generate an entity update. So it will actually calculate the diff between those two. Apply delta goes and takes, this one I believe has been pretty much fully implemented. It goes and takes a map of entities, so from ID to entity. It takes an entity update and it goes and updates those entities with the information from that. So that gets used whenever an acknowledgement comes in so that we can update what we think the client can see. So in here, can't remember where I'm at now. No, in here. Let's get a bit of pseudocode in here. Thank you for the wish of good luck with my coding. I hope it's a productive one. I feel like I'm getting really close to having the protocols bedded down, and once I've got that, I can start making the server more robust, get it deployed out into the cloud, and get my first gameplay scenario set up. So I'm feeling really bullish at the moment. I also have my half a litre of coffee. It's like, what, 16 ounces or something for Americans? I think that's about right. Yeah, about 16 ounces. So overwriting the client. Yeah, so this is really, it's not so much overwriting the client, it's just keeping a copy of what we know the client can see and just always working out what we need to tell the client to do in order to keep its stuff up to date. The client has a lot of code to be done, to be written as well. So the client is still very, very dumb in the way that it handles packets from the server. It receives a packet from the server and it just says, oh, well, I need to create an entity, and it just makes sure that entity exists. It needs to do things like keep track of which packets it's sent out so that it can just send updates to the server as well. So a lot of this code will get replicated on the client, but be a cut down version, because all it cares about is sending out movement messages and commands, things like pick up, put down, and all the harvesting commands. So there will be similar code to this on the server in on the client in C#. Okay, my pseudocode. I have to say for index the entities. Then for each entity, generate a diff. So what I can do in here, in fact, is I can actually just run over each of these entities. I'm not indexing them yet. I'm aware of that. And then in here, I can just return generate delta. Now, what do I want to generate a delta from? Well, ideally, I'd look up the entity in my local copy of the client, but for now, I'm just going to send through undefined, which is, that will be interpreted by generate delta as the client does not yet have this. So this is not what the final code will look like, as we should be looking this up, and then we'll pass it the entity. That should give us an array of entity updates. We generate the index and find existing copies in the client state, and find deletions is another important one. We need to know what's actually been deleted, but we won't do that yet. Oh, we've got a few people in nice and early today. That's nice. Oh, what have I done? If, we want introduce a local variable, entity updates is going to be equal to that. And then I can return a proto.server message from JSON. And then what do we need to put in here? Can I do it from partial? I just want to see what this actually does. Does this give me completion? It does give me completion. I need a way of generating a random UUID. I'll just check how I'm currently doing that. I'm not sure I do send through an ID. That's pretty funny. a server message is meant to have an ID. Okay, so my code apparently doesn't currently send through an ID, so let's actually fix that. I have this UUID class. I'll just implement a static factory, which is just a random, generate random, and this will return. I'll let it work out what it returns. It's going to be something like uuid.from buffer from bytes math.random. No, I want, how do you get random bytes? Random bytes node.js crypto.random bytes 16. All right. Get my typing right. All right. Generate random to proto. Because we're generating a protobuf message here. There we go. That should generate a random ID for us. Notice I am just using random IDs. I'm not bothering to use anything resembling sequential IDs because subsequent packets could be generated by different servers. It's conceivable that you could even have 2 packets getting generated in parallel, and we will just cope with that. And by having them random, it removes any expectation that they'll be increasing over time. Okay, what else do we need? We need entity updates. We've already got entity updates. This wants entity update. Oh, that's a big error message. Entity update or undefined. Ah, yes. So here, is this an array? Yes, it is an array. Okay, so I'm actually going to use a reduce here. The problem is generate delta, the way it's been written, is it says, for example, if the source and the destination are undefined, then return undefined. So undefined means no change is needed. Likewise, we come down here and it's generating all the different updates it needs. And it says, hey, if there's no transform, no location, no static, no components, then just return undefined. In other words, we have identical objects. So undefined is a special case of no update is needed. So I want to filter out these undefineds. I could do that as a dot filter and say, filter out the undefineds, but it's slightly cleaner to do this as a reduce. This is going to be, I need 2 methods here, 2 parameters here. I need to know the updates and the new entity. We are going to return an array of entity updates. And then we're going to say, we're going to grab the update. And then if the update is not defined, then we're just going to return the existing list of updates. So it'll start out as an empty list. Else, return the list of updates plus this new update. So anytime, it doesn't like that, why not? Oh, that's meant to be an array. Not find name updates. Oh, I can't spell. Updates. There we go. So we start out with an empty list. For each entity, we try generating its delta. If it's defined, then we append it to this list that keeps on getting generated. And then the final list comes out here. This is now the correct type. Chunk invalidations, I'm going to leave as empty for now, like that. Obviously, this will relate to the indexing method. So if we get too many changes in a chunk, then we need to not generate some entity updates. So if this object here is too big, then we need to go and pull things out of it and bundle them up as chunk invalidations. So get the client to just go fetch them some other way. Once something has been sent out as a chunk invalidation, it's worth noting we're no longer allowed to send updates for it, because otherwise the updates will get processed potentially out of order. So for now, we just won't send any. This definitely won't work because this list of entity updates will be too big, will overflow the UDP frame size. So this will silently fail, is my suspicion. But I've not integrated it yet anyway. So there we go. There's a generate message function. But what I have been working on is writing these tests. So the tests are straightforward. Make sure that if we've got two undefined entities, that the result is undefined. Two identical entities, make sure the result is undefined. It looks like these tests are failing. No, that's passing. It's all passing. Maybe. I spoke too early about lots of people in early in the stream. I think I scared everyone out. We've got 3 total at the moment, 2 in YouTube and 1 on Twitch. Test can change transform. So let's just make take 2 transforms that are identical, 2 entities that are identical apart from their transform. So we're just going to do e2.transform is equal to x being e2.transform.x plus 5. I don't really care. I'm just going to do that. That way we know it's all being changed. Position. Dot position. Welcome back, Osleth. Okay, so if we construct these 2 entities, construct entity just goes and creates just an entity with a bunch of values. It's got a component. There's an attribute on that component. The object itself doesn't really make sense because it has a location, so it exists within the world. It also has a parent entity and a slot. So real entities won't have both a location and inventory parameters, but this code, all of this code is going to be completely, like, it doesn't care about the correctness of that. So my tests will not rely on that. It's just an easier way of making sure I test everything. So let's generate that delta. This should fail because I do not expect this to be undefined. And excellent, it did fail. To be to equal. All right. So this is going to be an entity update. So const expected is going to be all sorts of buttons here. That, so I expect the entity ID to be that. Do my levels generate differently? What do you mean by that, a random guy? Do you mean, is the terrain different each time I go in? No, my terrain generates, it's got a fixed seed. I just found a seed that kind of had the origin, so coordinate 0000, had the origin at about sea level. And otherwise, the terrain is always generated the same way with a constant seed. I can tweak that seed, and that will completely change the terrain. Okay. So expected is an entity ID. We've got an update type, proto.entityUpdate. No, proto.update type. This should be an update. Is static, should be false. There's no transform. This might be a mistake in my protocol. No, there has to be a transform. Ah, I moved it into here. So I expect coord to be specified. So the way that I've implemented this, once you specify the location, I expect all the fields to be filled in so that it's easier to if you want to remove something from the world, you just set its coordinate to undefined and that will pull it out of the world. That's pretty funny, Oslath. I didn't realize that either. So you were a few minutes behind, were you? When I've watched streams before, I've sometimes just I've had to pause to go away for a few minutes, and because I didn't want to miss anything, I just changed the playback speed to be a bit higher. A1 dot location. Is that allowed? Oh. Welcome back, Griffith. I'm currently writing unit tests for my new netcode that I've kind of been working on in the background. In this case, I have two identical entities. On one of them, I modify its transform, and I'm trying to make sure that we only send through the transform update. The fact that I use different terminology here is really starting to annoy me, so I'm probably gonna fix that sooner rather than later. Once we specify a location, we do need to send through all of the location data. So that includes the transform. We're expecting this to be e2.transform. Can I just do transform? Yes. We need a parent, which is going to be e2.parent entity. Yeah, wave function collapse is a pretty common one, and there's a lot of stuff on YouTube for it. I've not looked into it myself, and I use simplex. It's a simplex noise, so I can't remember even which episode I covered it in. Episode 12 definitely covers it. Yeah, I've heard it generates much more realistic. Wave function collapse generates more realistic terrain than normal kind of what do they call multi-octave noise, which is what I'm using. Slot is going to be e2.slot. Okay, what else do we need? Generic components. I'm expecting that to be empty. So even though our entities have components on them, there is no difference. So I'm expecting them to come back completely empty. Let's do expected. Does this seem fair? I think this seems fair. Let's test it. The transform was good. Okay, I think this is a bug in my code. This is what you want to see when you're writing tests. It can often feel like a waste of time when you write a bunch of tests and your code works. But here, it seems that the diff code, let's just run this in the debugger, is not generating a full location diff, which it should, according to my rules. Delta is I should mention there's a chance I might need to stand up and answer my door if my doorbell rings. I am expecting a delivery. If that happens, I'll just put a little banner on my screen for 30 seconds. No, so I got the network stuff working in the end yesterday. This is the new code. So the current code that's running on the server and the client causes all of the entities to get sent out on every single tick. I mean, a bunch of them get sent out as chunk invalidations, but it resends those chunk invalidations on every tick. This is my new code that uses this object I've been working on for quite a while now in the background, which basically keeps a copy of what it thinks the client state is, and it goes and looks at what the entities are meant to look like and generate diffs from in here. So at the moment, the current version of the code, this here has not been integrated yet, but the current version of the code doesn't even handle deletions properly. So if a player logs out, another client just doesn't even see the player leave, for example. And this will fix all of that and mean that we don't send out every single entity on every frame. So this is my new proper diffing netcode, but this is not currently integrated. So I've kind of written this properly from the ground up, the way I would write a commercial class if I were developing something commercially. I'm now just getting the unit tests so that I know that it works roughly as I expect, and then the integration should be really straightforward. I don't think I currently have unit tests for the current network code. Because it was all just hacked together, just so that it kind of worked. Just had to get enough to work for one of the episodes, and that's what I've been sitting on since. All right, so this test is really just saying if I change a transform on an entity, do we generate the diff that includes the location update and nothing else? Yeah, there's been a fair bit of smoke and mirrors, I have to admit. I mean, I'm always honest about it. I've not been leaving things unimplemented and saying they're implemented. Uh, but yeah, there's a lot of code that needs to get properly reworked like this. All right, so what's my delta? My delta has an entity ID. Excellent. I'll just make sure that this looks right. My this one ends in 703. This one ends in 703. Perfect. My update type is an update. My transform includes a position. Maybe this is a problem in the test. I've not written many tests for the database code. Welcome back, Mason. Database code can be a little bit annoying to test. I don't like to write kind of unit tests that depend on an implementation being in behind there. So to write the database tests, I've got two different approaches I can use. One is to uh, find a mock implementation of Mongo database, and then just test that it's doing the right thing. I could run a Mongo database in process. Or alternatively, I can do like a unit test. I'm really not a big fan because my database code itself is actually quite thin, and the correctness of it is around making sure that I'm calling the correct Mongo operations. Things like, I've got dollar pushes and dollar sets in the right spot. So I need to work out how I'm going to write those database tests. I do need them. I will need them more and more as this code gets more mature. But yeah, that's an unsolved problem for me. The whole question of how to test it. All right, so I need to remind myself what my protocol looks like here. We've got an entity update. This should be sending through something called a location. So let's just check that. Yeah, it's called location. So my code, and welcome back, Ifman. most of the usual suspects. Uh, yes, kind of, Griffic. I don't like my tests to. It's that I don't like my tests to have any dependency between them. So as long as I've got a way of running Mongo where I can recreate the Mongo database for every single test and then blow it away easily, then I'm happy with that. But I don't like to. I generally don't like to have any dependencies between my tests. So I don't want a situation where uh, I don't know, running one test can cause data to be in the database and then give you false passes on a following test. Uh, yeah, unless you can blow away your database on every single test, then the tests are difficult to rely on. Now, this is different if I'm going to do a system test. A system test, I'm much happier with creating the database once at the start of a test run, doing a bunch of operations, and then making sure that you're having the desired effect. Yes, you can drop everything in between tests, but again, I prefer to have the test running, have the database running in process. Uh, that way, I don't want to have Mongo installed on the computer, for example. My philosophy is that developers should be able to just pick up the source code and have the source code, a minimal number of dependencies, and have it all just run. Yes, a drop all function in the test suite would potentially do what I wanted, as long as I don't have an external dependency. It can normally be done. I mean, I normally test against Postgres, for example, and it's not perfect, but when I'm testing against Postgres, rather than requiring that Postgres be installed on uh, installed on the local machine or somehow running it in process, I usually just use a drop-in replacement for Postgres. So there's another database called H2 that has it uses a subset of SQL that is very similar to Postgres. It's intentional. And that can make a really good testing environment, and H2 can be run in process in memory. I do not have a hosted database. My database runs in a Docker container. In production, it will absolutely be a hosted database, but that's a different matter. No, I would not want a hosted test database for the unit tests, uh, because of exactly what you say there. You can't possibly know the state of that test. So an in process copy of Mongo, I'm sure it exists. In fact, have we got? I might as well look up what other people have done. MongoDB um, uh, in memory for testing. Um, yeah, someone will have implemented a clone of Mongo that just runs in memory, and so I'll use that. Okay, so here my issue is my diff code. I think that I've refactored my location code since I wrote this code. I could run an additional local database for testing. In fact, I could, as part of my test suite, actually spin up a fresh Docker image. But if there's a lightweight in-memory clone of Mongo, that's just as good for testing and probably a lot faster. So here my location update is probably wrong. Why is that? Okay, we no longer have transform update. I need to get rid of that. Uh, this code is totally wrong. No, let's make that transform update. I've got to implement this. All right. So if those vectors differ, then set transform update. Then down in here, I want to say if transform update or location update. No, this needs to be coord update. I'm not a big fan of this. Changed. Catch around, graphic. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to say location has changed if either position or rotation has changed. Source dot location coord. There needs to be a question mark somewhere in here. But location. But source could be. Oh, source in here can be undefined. Is that right? Source is undefined. Oh, no, source is always defined. Okay. Location dot chunk. No, what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to say if source is undefined, then we can also return true. So this is a case where if the entity didn't exist before, but it does now, then we do need to send through all the location data because it's a new entity. So we definitely need to send it through. So now I think I can actually get rid of, if not source.location, sorry. We know we have a location. GitHub Copilot, that's the AI coding engine, is it? If so, then yeah, I've used one of their competitors, or maybe it is actually part of GitHub and just with a different name. I've used Tab9 before. and just the free version, I'm not overly impressed. It might partly be the plugins for the JetBrains products that I don't like. It quite often tries typing my comments for me and does a really bad job of it. And I rarely find situations where it writes good code. I'm not sure if Copilot and Tab9 are the same thing or not. I know Microsoft was involved in both of them. Uh, but yeah, I don't remember if they're the same. Not a fan of Tab9 though. It's a nice idea. And you can come up with a bunch of really good cases where it goes and writes the functions for you. But when you go to use it in, again, this is for Tab9, not necessarily Copilot. When you go to use it in anger and you're writing something like this, no, it doesn't know how to write this function, and it can't know how to write this function because it's too domain specific. So I've really just not seen the value for them. It seems like an area that I think will improve in time. You coordinate. This is going to be some very verbose code. Patient.chunk.b. Now, I'm actually going to, I know I shouldn't leave code this broken, but I really need to get rid of all my references in my code to where instead of calling this chunk and the other one hex, they're called UV and QR. It's going to start causing me problems in a moment. So I am going to quickly just rename this one here to be chunk, and this one here to be hex. We'll leave the Y as it is. Got this protoc command. We'll just recompile my protocol buffers, and I'll generate the C# code as well. We'll copy the C# code into the right spot. Okay, now anywhere that I've got in my code, .uv, this most likely all needs to be renamed. So I'm going to call this one chunk. I'm going to call this one hex, this one chunk, this one hex. This should be updating lots of my code as I go here. Different reference. I just don't want to have these UVs and QRs. The Qs and the Rs are fine, but just not the QRs. The U's and the V's are fine, just not the UVs. Let's see, where else do I have them? That one is allowed to be there because that's describing an axis. Oh, this is in generated code. I don't want to get into generated code. Just do star.ts. I still have a UV reference. I do. I still have a UV reference. That's meant to be chunk. X. In fact, these ones were the type. Yeah, all right. I'll just leave that as it is. Oh, I need to rebuild and copy that in. There we go. Oh, I've already almost replaced them all. It already knows that this is wrong. Chunk. chunk. All right. I shouldn't have too many references to QR now. X. Have I ever listed anything on the Unity asset store to sell? No, I have not. Uh, I'm not sure I necessarily would. It's possible. I can imagine myself writing a useful code library or something. Uh, um, yeah, I can imagine myself releasing some code. I can't imagine myself selling a piece of code though. I'd probably just put it up for free. Um, the only other reason I'd list something is I've mentioned that I would consider releasing my MMO engine for use by other developers. Someone incidentally asked a couple of streams ago about the cost of running that, and I just remembered after the stream that I misinterpreted their question, and they were asking about the cost of making it available freely, whereas I interpreted it as how I was going to make money on my game. I'll get to your question, Monty Logic, in just a moment. And the answer to the question about how I would fund making the MMO server available for free is it would just be a cut down, slower version of it. And if you wanted to pay for it, then you'd pay a game company that wanted to actually release a game. I'd expect them to pay some sort of a fee for access to a more performant version of it. And obviously, the libraries for that would be released through the asset store. But no, I don't currently have anything for sale. And that would be not be commercialized through the asset store. I'd just be making the library freely available in that case, and then selling access to better plans to run your game. By unit testing, do I mean as in GUnit? No. So I'm not sure your level of experience with software, Monty Logic, but it's unit testing normally refers to writing tests for individual functions. So where's an example here? I've got that's a really bad example. I've got my graph builder. I've got this function here called put cell in corner index, and it's quite normal to. Oh, GUnit is a hip hop group with 50 Cent. Sorry, I totally missed the joke. ah, the funny thing is GUnit is a unit testing framework made by Google. So GUnit is actually related to unit testing is a funny thing. Yeah, sorry for not getting the joke. That was pretty funny. I feel a bit silly. Chunk difference dot chunk difference is I need a chunk coordinate. And I think I've got a QR somewhere in here. There's QR. Um, let's call this one 6. All right. But welcome, Modulogic. I don't always have jokes go over my head. It probably happens more often than it should, but all right. So stuff is just generally not compiling now. That's a bit annoying. Let's stop everything. Oh, this should never have worked. Oh, that's a test. Oops. Oh, wait. Make that async. All right. I don't want to be testing. I don't want to be fixing these tests at the moment. I'm just going to have to. Argument of type. Got a function to graph chunk. It's not assignable to graph builder. Oh, this is meant to be a promise. So if I just go async, excellent. Path is meant to be a wait, and then it complain. I can get it to fix it. That's async, so that has to be a wait. Excellent. Goes to show I haven't run that test in a while. More compile errors. Yeah, a random guide. Not much has happened. I made a fool of myself for not getting a joke and started explaining what unit testing was. um, but otherwise, I'm just going through. I've done a slight refactor of my coordinates. My protocol no longer refers to UV. It now refers to everything as chunk. Why did I do that? Well, I can now write, rather than having to, I've got this code all over the place that looks like this. It's the bit that I'm implementing at the moment. Axial coordinate source.location.hex .q source.location.hex.r, and then we also need the source.location.y. This will, I'll be explaining this in a second. So I've got this code all over the place. And the reason I just wanted to refactor that is it looks like this sometimes, whereas other times it looks like that. Whereas now it always looks like this, which makes it really easy for me to actually make this a function of chunk coordinate. So let's go to chunk coordinate. And then I'm just going to put a static factory on here. So this is going to be a public static from JSON. Yeah, Mason, on that topic, if I were an artist or a modeler or an animator, I would absolutely be selling my work on asset stores. I just don't. I'm not as big a fan of selling code, just because code is it's harder to protect. Uh, it's easier just to release something once you've developed it. I don't think there are too many people out there that are developing pieces of code for the purpose of selling it. And it's a lot of work to integrate someone else's code as well. So I just don't think there's necessarily all that much benefit in just a static library. Whereas artistic assets, I see a lot of value in them, and I purchase a lot of artistic assets myself. The chicken and the troll in my game have been purchased. I've purchased other assets that I think I might use in the future or in other projects. So I think there is a market for artworks. And yeah, I would support artists making money like that. I know a lot of people don't like the concept of asset flipping, but for indie developers, I think indie developers need to get over themselves a little bit. I know I shouldn't be talking like that when I'm a new game developer myself, but people need to embrace, you can't do everything yourself. And so people should be leaning on these marketplaces more um, to focus on what matters, which is gameplay. That's I'm allowed to get opinionated. I'm on stream. That's my job, right? To be opinionated. All right. So here I've got this from stream, from JSON, and then in here I'm just gonna say JSON is just an any. I can be smarter than that and actually say that this JSON is let's go interface. Chunk-like object. I'm going to have this chunk-like object, which is going to have a U, which is a number, and a V, which is a number. That's going to get exported. And then back in here, this from JSON is going to take a chunk-like object. Now all I have to do is return a new coordinate JSON.u, JSON.v. It doesn't like that because, oh yeah, this is meant to be a chunk coordinate. So now, instead of doing all this garbage, I should just be able to do chunk coordinate dot from JSON source dot location dot chunk. And this is about to get simpler again. Because once I do the same thing for axial, dot from JSON source dot location dot hex, create method from JSON. JSON, I'm going to pull this out as a refactor this. Yeah, and Mason, there are some exceptions. Like, there are some pieces of code that I almost think should be part of the engine, such as highly customizable character controllers. That's something that I think the engines all do really badly. There are some really good commercial character controllers out there. I can't be bothered buying them because I can make my own, but they should be part of the engines, I think. But there are pieces of code like that that I'm sure people do buy that I think add value. And perhaps I should have bought a character controller rather than developing my own, although it's the first thing you develop in a game pretty much. And I was learning Unity at the time, so it made sense for me to develop my own. I may well replace my character controller and replace it with something from the asset store, Unity asset store. And I'd be more than happy to pay for a character controller. I want to extract an interface, and I want to call this one axial like JSON. Go, turn a new axial component coordinate, which is going to be from JSON.q, JSON.r. I know this feels like a lot of code to be doing just for a test, but I am going to reuse this all over the place. And this is where it gets really valuable. Because in here, I can now do from JSON, and I can actually just pass it the source dot location. Create method from JSON. Call this one JSON. I will refactor this by extracting an interface called coordinate like JSON. But I need to go and change it quite a bit because we already have a type here, which is chunk like object. And this one is an axial like object. This should be, just for consistency, let's make that object axial like object. Export that. Add an import. Turn new coordinate using a chunk coordinate from JSON, JSON.chunk. Axial from JSON dot x and a y. JSON.y. Here we go. So all of that code, my code will compile. Did my code compile? No. Dot global hex. All of that code lets me replace that horrible block of code that I have all over the place with just this. That makes me happy. So there's my source coordinate. Const destination coordinate is going to be coordinate.fromJSON dst.location. That doesn't seem right. What's it complaining about? Okay. So here the issue is that destination location could be undefined. So that's easy enough just to do that. So this is a coordinate or an undefined column. So what I'm trying to say is if the coordinates have changed, so if not source coord dot equal to, I'm going to have to define that, dst coord, then return true because they've changed. So I'll create that. That's right, Montelogic. That was the giveaway. I'll know in future. If not other, then return false. If this is equal to other, so if they're the same reference, return true. Otherwise, return this dot y is equal to other dot y, and this dot chunk. I've done an equals method before. Let's rename that one to equals. Chunk equals other dot chunk. This is all just boilerplate. This dot x equals other dot x. Nice. Make sure these are actually defined. That one is defined. That one is defined. Nice. So if they're not equal, then the location has changed. All right, next. Catch her around, a random guy. I'm not 100% sure if I'll be streaming tomorrow. I It depends on if I get through all my stuff today, because I do need to put a bit of work into this weekend's devlog episode. So whether or not I stream tomorrow just depends on whether or not I get all the code done for it. This is all part of next weekend's episode. But hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully I am streaming. Well, hopefully I'm not streaming, because that means I got through all my work. Or maybe I get through it all in this stream and I can do most of the episode this afternoon. We'll see how I go. All right. Yeah, the episodes take me a lot longer to make than I'd like. The streams are just so much easier. Just sit down, code, chat with you guys. But yeah, a devlog episode can take me easily 20 hours to make a devlog episode. They're quite painful. I enjoy it, but it's a lot of work. So if the coordinates have changed, if the transform has changed, then we need to send through the location. If the coordinates have changed, we need to send through the location. Lastly, if source coord dot parent entity not equal to destination coordinate dot parent entity, doesn't like that, dot location question mark. What's it complaining about? No. Entity has just a straight parent entity. I don't understand what it's complaining about here. Entity is a transient entity, and a transient entity has a parent entity. I mean, what if I tell it to create a field? Oh, that's on, what's that? Oh, source coord, that should be source. I should trust my IDE more. So in here, I can just, in fact, just return that, or source.slot not equal to destination.slot. All right, so if any of those things have changed, then we need to send through a full location update. A little bit messy here. There we go. And just looking back over the comments, just want to mention, Mason, you apologize for random questions. I have no problem with random questions. Welcome back, JetBrains. I assumed you'd be just popping in yesterday and vanishing. I'm glad you were able to return. Today I'm working on unit tests to get some new code. I've been working on a refactor of my netcode, working on getting that unit tested and then integrated. So it's much more development heavy today than it was yesterday. Okay, where are we at? So we've decided that the location has changed at this point. I'm currently fixing a bug that one of my tests has picked up. We're not generating updates when an entity changes location. So just fixing that code up. I believe this is called coord. I'll just check that. I54.proto. My location has a coordinate called coord. And then coord is just going to be, so we need a chunk, we need a hex, and this is another benefit in me renaming these types. It's now consistent with all my entity types and things. So we already have the destination coordinate. No, we don't, but I can easily create it. It's just coordinate dot from JSON, and we just go destination dot transform dot destination.transform. This might not be defined though, so if it's defined, then we'll do that. Otherwise, it's still not happy. Oh, because this isn't meant to be the transform, this is meant to be the destination.location. And if it's not defined though, I will just set this to undefined, because that means that the server is attempting to actually remove the location from this entity, which would indicate that it is that would indicate that the item is being taken out of the world. Now, likewise, I actually need to put a condition on here. If the transform is not defined at all on the item, on the entity being sent through, then that means it's again being removed from the world. So I'll do this. Hopefully we get some nice indentation when I ask the editor to reformat this. I think we will. Yep, that looks pretty good. It's clear that we're doing a ternary operation. Okay. Let's see. So a location update needs to have the coordinate, needs to have the transform, it needs to have the parent entity, just the dst.parent entity, and it needs to have the slot. That is a full location update. I'll probably need to break this function up a bit, but I'll just leave it for now. We have done that. We don't need any of that. So what do we got? We check if it's being created, we do that. If it's being if it never existed and still doesn't exist, there's no diff, so we just return undefined. We get the ID. If the item's being deleted, we tell the client to delete it. If any part of its location tree has changed, we regenerate the entire message so that things can be updated, either have their transform created or deleted. If the static field has changed, then we note that. We no longer have a transform update because locations are sent through. Let me pull up my protocol for an entity update. We've got the ID, we've got the type, we've got if it's static, we've got the location type, the location update, sorry. So lastly, I need to implement this part, the actual component updates. Now, I haven't got a test for that yet, so I won't implement this until I've got a failing test. It doesn't like this. It is missing location. Ah, yes, this is just missing that. Just an extra brace there. Is that right? Is static has the is static. Component update needs to have, I don't know how this compiled before. I'd really appreciate that, JetBrains, and I'd be more than happy to put like a 30-second blurb in one of my devlog episodes as well for that. I know you're not requiring me to do that, but I'm a fan, huge fan of your products, so I'd be more than happy to do that. And would very much appreciate the yeah, the opportunity to give something back to my viewers. Okay. Yes. Yeah, I think that my current viewers are very kind of dev. Well, a lot of them are young. I've seen my analytics. I have a lot of young viewers, and um, so yeah, they would love to have access to something like Rider and just give them that leg up over people using other tools. I think that's a really awesome. That would be really appreciated, JetBrains. Okay, so component updates needs to be component updates. Oh no, this is generic components or something. No, this is meant to be an undefined for now until I actually have something to put in there. Uh, Still not quite right. I think I can do that. And then if I make this one here, all right. Still don't know what's wrong with this. Not assignable. Undefined is not assignable to type Boolean. Yeah, okay. So my problem here is this is static update. I think that's the only Boolean. Type Boolean undefined is not assignable to type Boolean. Yes, so it's going to be in my definition of this. This is going to be pretty straightforward. I just need a... If those two are not equal, there we go. Just need a default value on it. This will actually, I suspect, never actually happen because this is coming out of my entity service, and it does always populate that field, but I just can't mark it as a required field because I do construct these things on the fly. So I'm sure I can change that in future and make that a required field, but not worth it at the moment. Still not quite there. Undefined. It's still... no, I must be misunderstanding something here. Oh, this is a different error. Location needs something called a parent, so I think this is just a typo. Needs parent. I'll check my protocol. Location indeed has something called a parent, but I think that this is the wrong type. This needs to be a UUID from hex to proto. Yes, that's right, undefined. Slot is undefined. Okay, so what the issue I'm running into here is in the case where these aren't defined, I'm not going to be returning a complete update. I think that I can, no, I can't say undefined there. No, so the issue here is just that DST slot might be undefined, and the protobuf specification doesn't allow strings that are undefined, so I have to pass through an empty string in that case. Just gonna have a couple more of these. Type property location is optional, but required in entity update. Really? Why would entity update require... Okay. So the issue here is what I was kind of getting at before, which is if this is undefined, then we never specify a field called location. And so if it is undefined, we do just need to explicitly mark the location as undefined. It's a little bit annoying, but there we go. So now every single one of the fields that make up our entity update do now get yeah, they do now get correctly set. Okay. Does that test pass? That's the big question. Generate delta, generate delta. X. In here, I think I can actually just say e1.location now that I've refactored my coordinates. Run the test again. Fingers crossed. It is so much closer. Oh, okay. Yes. The issue here is that my coordinate types have these extra parameters on them. Now, if I recall correctly, these do not actually get sent from the server. That is correct. They get stored in Mongo, but we suppress them, I believe, as they come out of the server. Let's just confirm that. Spin up my server. They will come out of the server, actually. My test is fine without them, though, because those extra parameters are actually negative the sum of these other two. And so if either of these have changed, then we'll generate a proper diff. So I'm just going to ignore this. My code doesn't run. That's kind of interesting. It's going to be something that hasn't been updated from after my refactor of my coordinates. My test passes though, which is good. So next, I will just bring up my server from the command line. Just find out what this compile error is. Update factory line 63. So this whole thing can obviously, oops, hey, don't do that. Can obviously just become entity.location. Like that. So that's why I did that refactor, because I've got code like that all over the place. We'll just find any other cases that I have the same problem. Is this? Oh, yeah, that's okay. I should probably rename these, shouldn't I? I'm not allowed to rename the... What on earth? Oh, sorry, this is a chunk. Yes. I'm going to call this code. So chunks, this is the chunk, all the chunk data. So this is the height maps and the actual meshes associated with that particular chunk. So rather than using hex or chunk here, I'm just going to call that the coordinate. It is a UV schema, that's fine. Find any other references to UV. Here's another one. This needs to become coord. UV and W is correct. And so this whole thing can actually just become entity.location. Much simpler code. I like it when the code gets simplified. Can the server start? There's probably something else I've got wrong somewhere. Nope, there's the server. That is up and running. Awesome. I'll just get that committed. Refactor coordinates, better names. Some unit tests. Excellent. And yes, I I know that I should have done that from inside the editor, but I'm too used to the command line. Welcome, Shroom. I am using C# in the client. The client is Unity, and on the server, I'm using TypeScript. It's a lot of people will know this already, but it's a JavaScript derivative. It runs in Node, but it's a type-safe version of JavaScript used for writing servers. Okay. So, time for another test, I guess. I mentioned I still had that to do in my code, so let's write a test that breaks my that code. So I'm going to add a component. Test add component. I'm going to write just a couple of failing tests here. Just we're going to make sure that we can remove a component, add an attribute to existing component, remove attribute from existing. Oh, I didn't actually make these tests fail, did I? And then change attribute on existing component. So these are all things I'm going to have to make sure work. Can I just write fail, which is a deprecated method? Fails a test. Why is it deprecated? Was it deprecated? No, it's not deprecated. So we'll just get these ones down here. Okay, so I'll now write these one after the other. These should be pretty straightforward. We start out with these 2 lines of code. We add a new component. Which it needs to have an ID. So that's UUID dot generate random to proto. Oops, to proto. We've got a type. Why doesn't it like ID there? Ah, this is meant to be a string. We've got a type, which is going to be new component. Doesn't really matter what that is. We have attributes. I'll make the attributes hello world. What? Attributes. Oh. It's been a bit too strict on its typing here. IntelliJ will be able to help me out here. I'm sure that this will be able to do a cast. No. Own properties. That's meant to go in here as entity. Will it let me do that? Yes. Doesn't like these. We know that we have a transform. We know that we have a parent entity. We know that we have a slot. All right. So we've created a new component on the entity. So I'm going to then do const delta is going to be equal to generate delta from E1 to E2. Now this will definitely fail because I haven't written this code. Const expected. This is an entity update. How did I write that last time? I want the type safety if I can get it. No, it's not going to give me the type safety. That's all right. I'll just copy that code out, paste it in here. We are expecting an entity ID. We're expecting an update, expecting that location in this case should be undefined because we're not changing any of the properties of the location. Generic components should include a single update. And this is going to have an ID, which is, need my protocol again. Oops, where's my protocol? Here's my protocol. A component update has something called component ID. Oh, that should be a bit better about our names here. All right, so the component ID is going to be e2.components1.id. Still doesn't like it. Yeah, because I'm not finished. Wants an update type. Now, while this is creating a new component, it will still come through as an update. And the reason for that is that we already have an ID. So a create is intended for when something is being created and we don't yet have an ID. So creates will only ever come from the client to the server. For example, when a command gets executed, like a pickup or a drop operation. Type, I expect to be new component. And attributes, I think is meant to be a list, isn't it? Yeah, I think this is meant to be a list of the protocol. Component attribute, we've got a name, and then I'm expecting a string value. Name, oh, name is meant to be hello. And then string value is meant to be world. I unfortunately have to include all of the other types in here. Undefined, undefined, undefined. Still not happy. Am I missing idempotence key? Is undefined because this is not a create. Idempotence keys are only used during creations. I've got an extra brace somehow. There we go. And just thank you, JetBrains, if you're still there. I have received your email. Thank you. Okay. So I think this is right. Got the expected. So then all I need to do is expect delta to equal expected. Now, this test will fail. I'm not even going to bother trying to run it because I haven't written the code. Well, I should try and run it. It's good practice. This is just a general piece of advice for any newer developers out there. It is a good practice to try just running a test in a failed state. And the reason for that is you want to be sure that your test is actually running and preferably failing for the right reasons. So if I had up here some sort of like a, I don't know, a return up the top here, and now I try and run this test, now obviously I wouldn't write a test like this, but if I did accidentally write a test like this, oh, that didn't fail. Oh, that's because I've got a compiler error in here. But this test would actually, if I didn't have compile errors, this test would now pass. And so it's good to have a test that you know is going to fail and make sure that it does fail on your actual assertion line. That way you know that your test is likely to be valid, and then once you make it pass, it's for the right reasons. Now, why doesn't it like that? Is like that. Do I need to do that? No. Name expected. I thought that was valid syntax. Maybe I have to do that. No, because that's... It's not assignable to type ID. Ah, I see the problem here. I'll pull out the component ID as... Oh, let's just get this in there. I'll pull that out as expected component ID. It still fail. But now what I can do is I can call UUID from hex, give it that, to proto, and still isn't right. Is that really not valid syntax? I'm just going to work out what I'm doing wrong here. I want TS node in this case. TS node. Is this going to let me? No. NPX TS node. I just want to run node. Yeah, okay. No, this requires me to have a module. So I can't test my syntax in my console because I need a transpiler. That's all right. All right, if I make that a question mark, can I force it? Yes, okay. This is not the syntax I was hoping for, but it looks like you can't do an exclamation mark dot index. That's annoying. TypeScript has a lot of annoyances like that. So hopefully my test passes, my test fails on the correct line. Again, I'm expecting failure because I've not actually implemented this. And sure enough, we can see here that everything is okay, except once we got to generic components. Oh, it's doing stuff in a very funny order, but my generic components is an empty array, whereas it was expecting an actual array. So next, I will implement the missing code. Generate delta. Where's generate delta? Here it is. Got this lovely little to do here. And what we want to do here is take the difference between these two arrays. Now, one thing that we know for sure on the server, because this is all code running on the server, we know that these components will all have IDs. So we can probably start by building up like a map of ID to the both the source and the destination. So let's do that. Generate component diffs, source dot components, dest dot components. Now this is one of the things that I like IntelliJ over VS Code for. This is a case where the refactoring is awesome. I can just tell it to generate this function and it will go off and work out all of the typing for me. We do that. It knows that it could be an array of components or undefined. And likewise, there we go. So I don't need to worry about what those types are. The editor just goes and works it out for me. So DST components, source components, and in here we can say if source components is not defined, we can say not. I believe this will cover the case of either undefined or empty. I can test that in a command line with, so there's exclamation mark is like the not operator. If I do not, then what that will do is it will take whatever I put after it and convert it into a Boolean. So an empty array is true, undefined, oh, is false. Okay, an empty array is true. Yeah, that's not what I was hoping for. Okay, that's fine. If not source components, if not dest components, return. Welcome back, Griffic. If not return, we've got nothing to return. So we're just going to return an empty array because there is just nothing for us to do here. What we could also do in here, if these are undefined, it's exactly equivalent to these being an empty array. So I think we can actually do this, in fact. Now I can use the same logic. So this is just going to say that if they're not defined, then populate them with an empty array. So now I can get rid of this code entirely and start again. Welcome back, a random guy. You guys have both gone back at exactly the same time. I hope your phone call went well, Griffic. So how am I going to generate these diffs? I need to keep in mind that order matters of components. There's no way on the server, though, for components to change order unless they get destroyed and then recreated. Now, if that happens, their IDs will change. So for that reason, I believe I can step through the two arrays and anytime one of them has a component that the other one doesn't, I need to either do a deletion or an update. But I need to know which one to step forward. And the best way to do that is just going to be to have a map of component ID to a pair of Booleans. I'm just going to call it existence map. Existence. Well, existence. And that's going to start out being empty. My coffee's cold again. It's a problem with having extra large coffees. So we then need to go source components dot for each. I'm going to populate this existence map. I'm going to make it an object using an ID, which is a string in this case, and that's going to map to a tuple of boolean comma boolean. So this is just whether or not it's in the source and whether or not it's in the destination. I think I can give these ones names actually. Source exists and DST exists. In fact, I might as well just make this an object. Why not? So I'm going to populate this. I could do it using just a for each over the source components, then a for each over the destination components. I'm going to use a, I think I want to use a reduce. Can I easily do that? I'd have to do 2 reduces, wouldn't I? So I won't do that. I will indeed do it the way I was originally planning on doing it, which is just for each of these component, it's going to go to existence map for welcome Dota 2 attitudes. The coding is going well. I'm working on the netcode for my MMO, survival crafting MMO. And I have been having, I've been refactoring my, yes, WebStorm. This is not WebStorm, this is IntelliJ actually. And we have some great news, which is on my YouTube channel. I will soon be doing a giveaway, thanks to JetBrains, of 3 Rider licenses for anyone using, wanting to do C#. We've been given 3 licenses to give away, which is very generous of them. I will announce on an episode how I'll give those away. Component.id is going to be equal to, okay, this needs to be a true. I don't believe that the pausing is my fault. It could be something wrong with an international link. Yeah, Dota 2 Attitude, I've got the same bundle. I've got all the JetBrains products. Absolutely love them. Yes, no, I'm not dropping any frames. I am in Australia, and I know that the streaming services do kind of shuttle data around the world, so it's possible that there's something wrong with my with my ISP's international link. Okay, so this is going to be true, comma, that dot question mark dot DST exists. Type undefined, that doesn't seem right. Source components, right, so component should be a component, correct? Component, it's concerned that the component might not be defined. I'm just going to say it is defined. I really do know that that is defined. Bitrate shouldn't be. I'm going through Restream, and they claim I am all green. Let's double check that. Bitrate is 2.6 megabit, so yeah, I am all green across the board according to Restream. Not sure what the issue is then. My CPU usage is low. Drop frames is 0. Yeah, not sure. If anyone else is seeing any issues, then do let me know. DST exists or false. Okay. That's fine. That should not be a question mark, should it? Colon expected. Yeah, that's fair enough. T exists. Does function imply the internal variables are global? No. Uh, no, that's only the case on internal variables are never global on any function or arrow function. The all the stuff around this is to do with when you're in a class, but we're not in a class here, and yeah, so it shouldn't make any difference in this particular case. So in fact, these are when you're at the top level of a module, these two really are pretty much identical. There are some exceptions when you get down to binding, but I'm not using binding anywhere, I don't think. I try to avoid it when I can. And in fact, I just prefer the arrow function style. This was a function generated by a function generated by IntelliJ for me. Yeah, constant let block scope. Yeah, I do prefer the arrow functions, so just get IntelliJ to do that for me. All right. Ah, I did not know that. Yeah, so I am in strict mode. Uh, I think, yeah, I'd be crazy not to be. But yeah, so the var and const I always need everywhere for the way that I'm configured. For each component, it feels like asking for troubles to allow variables to get implicitly scoped, is implicitly declared. That I would not want to be dealing with typos. Existence map. Huh, I did not know that. Oh, var, sorry. Yeah, var. Yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah. There is a configuration in the tsconfig graphic for TypeScript to turn off strict mode. Uh, Not sure if that turns off all of the strict mode stuff. But yeah, I'm fairly new to JavaScript in general, so I kind of post date a lot of the var stuff. I've always used let and const. By fairly new, like it's several years I've been using JavaScript on and off, but okay, understood graphic. Okay, .id is going to be equal to source exists. I'm sure there's a cleaner way of doing this, but this will work. False, and DST exists is just going to be true. This is my first project using TypeScript. I've done a little bit of Node commercially, but my commercial work with JavaScript has mostly been, React, that kind of thing. A little bit of the older style stuff, I can't remember what they're called. Those oh, I've totally forgotten the name of the library that uses a dollar sign. jQuery, thank you. Thank you, Graphic. Yeah, jQuery a very long time ago. Okay, so I've got the existence map. That tells me whether or not things exist. So now I should be able to just step through each of these arrays. Yeah, jQuery it's pretty nasty. The Where I was using jQuery, um, we were A/B testing products, fairly large products, and we needed to be able to arbitrarily inject code um, and various divs and things into a very, very large commercial product. And so jQuery at the time was really good for it. Um, and I quite liked their dot notation, doing things like array, some array element dot. It just wouldn't continue on the dots. I can't remember the name of that coalescing, coalescing something operator. Can't remember the name of it. Okay, we've apparently just hit 100 messages in the stream today, according to Restream. So I have my existence map. Now I think I can just step forward through each of these arrays. This is going to be pretty nasty code. So let's do source index equal to 0, destination index equal to 0. There has got to be a better way of doing this, but now, while source index is less than source components.length, and then I think I want an or source destination index is less than destination components.length. I'm going to walk each of these indexes forward. In each iteration, it will walk forward either one or the other. Const existence is going to be equal to the existence map. No, sorry. I first of all need to get the source ID and the destination ID. Source ID is going to be the source component. Component is going to be source components source index. Destination component and then after getting the 100th message, everyone's gone quiet. Um, okay, so if source component dot ID is equal to the destination component dot ID, I'll take you heading off there, Griffic. Catch you around. Thank you for joining. Not sure if I'll be streaming tomorrow. It depends on how much I get through here, and I want to get started on the next devlog episode, which has been taking me a long time lately, so I'd like to get a head start on that. So I may or may not stream tomorrow. Source component.id equal to that. So here we have a match. So to do, generate the diff and step both indices, well, generate the diff. Then in this case, we need to do the source index. We're going to increment that one and increment the destination index. So that one's easy. Enjoy the rest of your day, Griffith. All right. Else. So we're either doing a new component or a deletion. So if the source, I think there's actually going to be a loop inside this loop. Okay, let's handle deletions. Handle deletions. So for each component in the source list, that's not in the destination list, we can just walk it forward. We can delete it and walk it forward. So if not destination component, nope, we need the existence. Let's just grab the existence record, existence map, dot, no, this is just a get the source component dot ID. I am going to be doing that in here because this is just going to be a while. That dot DST, while there is not a destination for these, we are just going to step forward the source index, move on to the next one, and generate a deletion. So const updates is an empty list. This is a list of component updates. Dot that. Updates dot push to a deletion. It is the component ID is going to be the source component dot ID. We know that exists. I probably need to improve my types a bit around components. So, oh, sorry, I've bumped my table. With entities, I've got two entity types. There's a transient entity and then an entity. And entities have a valid ID. I should probably do similarly with components so that I don't have to do these exclamation marks everywhere. Yeah, it's not as dodgy as it looks. Dota2 attitude. The ID does always exist on every component being passed in here. That's an absolute given. I do have undefineds coming in cases where components are being externally created. They can get passed through without an ID on them, and then as they get pushed into the database, they'll have an ID assigned to them. These are all coming out of the database. So just to show you what I've done elsewhere, unknown. For the type. I mean unknown type. I'll just show you what I've done elsewhere. So entities as well can be transient. These are all genuinely optional. But then I've defined entity to be a transient entity that also definitely has an ID. Yeah, I don't want to use unknown type because I definitely know the type of this, just that it there are cases where it does or doesn't have an ID. So I get more type safety by using that component type everywhere. But what I should be doing is having the concept of a transient component that doesn't have an ID, and then component that does have an ID. And that would be a lot cleaner. But I do prefer this to having stuff being passed in as unknown at the rest of it, because then I just don't have any type safety on that code. So I'd rather have that type safety and have this dodgy hack here. But yeah, this will go away. These exclamation marks will go away. Not when they come in from the clients, Data2. When they come in from the clients can't possibly know the ID because those IDs are assigned by the database. These are database IDs, not some system ID. So here the update type is going to be proto.updateType.delete. And then, yeah, the rest of the fields, when there's a deletion, just don't matter at all. We have to fill them in though. The type is whatever. And the attributes are, that's an empty list. There we go. Component ID, this needs to be converted to protobuf. There we go. Yeah, on your last comment there, Dota2, yeah, I think I actually use any on my APIs. But the thing is that IDs don't exist until after the message has been processed. They actually get passed. This is a distributed system I've got here. They get passed between multiple services before they eventually hit the database. And so they do exist in their transient form for quite a while. So I very firmly believe that the correct solution is to actually change this to transient, get rid of this ID, and then have a new component type that is a transient component with an ID. I think it's a much, much cleaner solution than I don't want things passing through the system in an unknown as an unknown type, just because they don't have an ID yet. But when they come in here, I definitely know they have an ID because this stuff has all come out of the database. All right. So, updates is, yeah, because we put stuff into it, that's fine. I am just going to return out of here. Updates. Okay, so that is how we do deletions. So as long as we have a source component that does not have a corresponding destination component, and then so as long as the source component has an ID that does not exist in the destination list, we know we need to delete it. We know that the order is consistent for any given set of IDs. The order is consistent between the source and the destination lists. So we can just keep on pushing along through the sources. I need to make sure I don't overflow here. While source index is less than source components.length, and that, excellent. So we'll just keep on shuttling along as long as we have sources that no longer exist in the destination. We create deletion messages for them. Then, while the destination index is less than the destination components dot length, and hello, a random guy. I take it you are popping in and out again today. Instance map dot source component. That's destination component, isn't it? Component dot ID dot source component. So as long as we have a destination component that we did not have in the sources, then I need to generate a full diff generate component diffs. I hate having methods with similar names, but I am just going to do generate component diff with a, we're going to start with undefined and pass it through the destination component. This is going to be updates.push. That. Here, we can do an updates.push generate component diff if source component destination component. In here, I'm actually going to cut that out just to get my stuff looking a bit more consistent. And this is going to be the source component and then undefined. Excellent. So now if I implement this, source component is a component, DST component is, these should actually both be component or undefined or undefined. If source component and not destination component, then we are going to return that. Otherwise, I need to get a valid source component. So I'm going to treat creation and changes the same. And the easiest way of doing that is to actually just say if we don't have a source component, then I'm just going to create a dummy one. Oh, I've got a spider or something jumped on me. I'm actually just going to override this just to be a dummy item with an ID, which is just going to be the destination component's ID. Everything else I'll just dummy out. We have to give it a type. We have to give it attributes. It's like that. Oops, what's wrong with this? Oh, whoops. Is that right? We don't know that destination component is valid there, but if we can say if not source component and not destination component, then return undefined. There's nothing for us to do in the case. Well, in fact, I'm going to say that that's never going to happen, and I'm just going to throw a new error. Basically an assertion. It really isn't ever going to happen. Object is possibly undefined. Well, it's not. I know it's not because either source component is defined or not. Therefore, destination component is definitely defined. I'm a bit annoyed that it's not working that out. I can make it work that out. I can actually say if not destination component, and in here, I can just do this. Otherwise, we can do this. There we go. Now that can get rid of that exclamation mark. There we go. So if we don't have a source component, then just fill in a dummy one that will give us the results that we want. And now I can return a valid update. This is going to be whatever source component.id. I'll probably .2attitude. I'll probably fix up these exclamation marks as soon as I've implemented this code, by the way. So because they are starting to bug me as well. The update type is going to be a proto.updateType.update. The type in this case is going to be a destination component.type. And the attributes, I need to write a function to generate these. What I might do is for now just pass through the destination components. It is not the correct thing to do. It will get our test passing and then we'll fail on one of my following tests where we are adding components or removing components. Actually, hang on, let me just look at my protocol again. No, this is the right functionality. When we do a component update, we give it an update type, which is update in this case, and then we just have each of the attributes. So I have intentionally made it for now so that it always sends through every attribute when there's a change being made. It's not ideal, but so I believe this will actually work for now. I have no way to delete individual attributes or modify individual attributes. If I wanted to do that, then I'd need an update type in here so that I could delete, create, and modify attributes. All right. Once I've got this compiling and the test passing, I will go and fix that problem with the component types. Argument type of component. Yeah, that's fair enough. That needs to be, just call that delta, and we'll just say if. No, wait, I never pass out. What's it complaining about? What have I done? Ah! Rid of that. Come in here. Let's look at what it's actually complaining about. Does delta not return a component update? This will just be one of those undefined things. If I tell it that it returns a component update, then, oops, that's meant to be proto. We never have idempotence keys on these. Protocol requires that we specify it. Okay, and then oh, there's a few problems here. I'm not updating source component. I feel like there's probably a much better way I could have written this. That is read-only. Yeah, I'm going to have to make these let, because I am stepping through I could change these to ifs. That would be sensible. That would be a much cleaner way of doing it. So let's not do that. Let's not do that and just say if. That way, all of the incrementing, oh, we do need to do the plus plus source index. And here we just increment it once, and then we'll get our new source components on our next iteration. It's the index. T component. Okay, does the test pass? That is probably too much to ask for. Add component, run that. Undefined. Ooh. So I am guessing that I'm ending up with undefineds in my source components. I shouldn't be. No, that one's okay. This one looks okay. What's happening here then? Ah, all right. So it's partly because of this or. What I need to do, because I'm allowing these to kind of run off the end, so I actually need to make this conditional on source index being less than source components.length. Otherwise, this does need to be undefined, and I need to handle the case of the components being undefined. DST index less than DST components.length or undefined. Now I need to be a bit careful here. Can we ever come in here with these two both being set to undefined? No, we cannot, because the moment they both fail this check, we will have fallen out of the loop. So I can indeed do that. If we run off the end, one of these will be undefined, which means we'll fall down into this case. In here, this is no longer needed. I can now just do source component. Go. And this whole thing can become dest component. That's simpler. Excellent. Sure, this whole thing will collapse down even more later. Let's clean up the code. Try running the test again. Yep, okay. This looks like a mistake in my test. Easily fixed. My expected. Oh no, that looks right, doesn't it? Oh, it's the order of things. Okay, I think I'm just using hmm. I just need to look up what the right kind of test here is. Let's go test expect fields in any order. Hmm. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run this again in the debugger and just confirm by eye that these two objects are indeed equal. Get rid of my prompt. Make sure I'm not including anything too important. No, excellent. So I've got the delta. I've got the expected. Entity ID ends in 111. Entity ID ends in 111. Update type is correct. Location, that doesn't look right. I am expecting location to be null. So that's a genuine mistake. And that is a bug in my code because I've not changed any aspect of the location, so it shouldn't be changing it. Is static is false, that's fine. Generic components, it's generating 3 of them. That's definitely not right. And what it's doing is it's deleting the component ending in 111. And then I'm guessing it's going to create it. Creates the component ending in 111. And then it creates another component. All right, so this isn't ideal. This is the whole thing I'm trying to avoid. For anyone new, I think we've only got one person on YouTube at the moment. One person on YouTube, 2 on Twitch. For anyone who's not been following me, what I'm actually working on at the moment is my existing network code is just sending back a copy of all the stuff in the player's vicinity every single time it sends out a packet. So this code at the moment is making it so that it actually generates a diff between what it thinks the client knows about and what the client should know about. So I think the best bet is going to be to just completely step through this code because we've got 2 bugs. One is the location code. All right, let's do it. Generate delta.test. Wait until we get our actual delta. Here it is. Rerun this code. It's doing. I must have done that as a run instead of a debug. Breakpoint was in the wrong spot. Try it again. All right. I'll step in. Sure I'm not including anything. My next game will be about. No idea. I have signed up for the Bracky's Game Jam, which starts later this month. I think it runs for a week, and so I might actually take a slight break from this one just to throw something together over a week. No idea what the theme will be, but I thought I should probably kind of do something smaller as well because I am going straight into a very large game here. So yeah, we come down through here. We've got a source, we've got a destination. We grab our ID. Destination should be defined. Has location changed? But for a game jam, I think I'd love to make just a little platformer or puzzle game or something like that, depending on what they decide the theme will be. So our IDs are there, our transforms. Well, let's start here. Our slot is primary. Our parent entity is the same. No, it's not. Huh. Well, there's my first bug. Um, when I'm generating these entities and things, I am regenerating all of the IDs. And that is an issue because the moment you change anything about this item's location, which could be its physical location, its transform, its coordinate location, its transform, its parent entity, so the inventory holder that it's part of, or the slot within the inventory. And because it thinks that the parent entity has changed, it is generating too many changes here. Likewise, we're probably getting subtly different IDs on our components. So what I need to do, this is going to be a problem in all of my tests. When I construct an entity, I need to pass through two parameters in here. We need an entity ID, and I need component ID. Let's make that a string. No, I'll make it a UUID. And this one, likewise, will be a UUID. While I'm only going to be sending through one of them, it's technically a list of component IDs. No, these should be object IDs. This is correct. Do that, do that. In here, we'll make that an entity ID. And this one is just going to be component IDs 0. Dot toString. That needs to be toString. Then down here, what I can do is I can just say const entity ID is going to be equal to that. So in here, oh, you have been hinting that there's a good name for it. And I promise not to reveal it to anyone who's not joining for every stream. I'm just wondering if I've missed any messages from you already that I'll have to look through the comment history to make sure that you haven't already dropped the hint, unless you drop it in a moment. Okay, so we're going to pass an entity ID. Excellent, noted, a random guy. And as I said, I won't tell people what the previous letters were. And I'll encourage people not to discuss the previous letters. So if anyone wants to see them, make sure you watch all the streams. We are up to 5 people across Twitch and YouTube at the moment. Okay, I'm going to make sure that this test still passes. I mean, it really should. No, it doesn't. Oh, my code doesn't compile, of course. Okay. should probably even not be using random object IDs. It's generally best to have your tests be completely reproducible. I have to spend too much time debugging these, then that's exactly what I will do. Okay, we are still not compiling. We are compiling. Yes. So rerun that test. I expect this one to definitely pass. Yes, excellent. Um, uh, did I correctly run that test? Let's just run all of the tests in there, just see which ones pass and which ones fail. Two undefined entities passes. Between two identical ones does not. So what I'm expecting in here is because these two entities are identical, it should generate an undefined delta. In other words, tell the client that nothing has changed. I'll let people read it themselves, a random guy. Twitch does see your comments, by the way. They Restream is set up in relay mode. So anything that someone says in one gets relayed into the other. So what's happening in here is obviously we're getting the components are not being detected as identical. This is the same bug that is causing a problem down in this test. So that's in all of the tests. I want this one restart. Is that going to debug? Please debug. Maybe. Debug. So generate the delta. It's not going to step in here. Location changed is going to be false. Location changed is true. That is unexpected. Let's compare them. IDs are the same. Transform is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Same as that. Location is 0134. Location is 0134. 6 is the Y. Parent ID is FO2. FO3. Parent entity. How are they different? What? FO2. Parent entity. FO3. That is not what I'm expecting. Oh, parent. All right. Yep. Well, as the streams go on, a random guy, you're only allowed to change later parts of it. Insert, insert, parent entity. Then I need to pass that new one into each of these. It's a new shortcut that JetBrains taught me yesterday. Okay, so come in here, do that. I need to fix each of these tests. Restart. Why my restart isn't working? Delta is still an object, so what is the difference between E1 and E2? Transform I've checked, location I've checked, that ends in C6, a slot is primary. Delta contains no location, that's perfect. But unfortunately we do have a generic component. I know exactly what the issue is here. My code is not handling the case where the IDs are equal, but the attributes are unchanged. So what I want to do in here is actually say if dot attributes, let's just put this in a method. If attributes changed between source and destination, then we will do that. So if they're unchanged, there's no need to generate a diff. Source component. Oh, what have I done? I've gotten into some weird mode here. There we go. Just insertion mode. Component dot. Okay, so let's implement that. Attributes is indeed an any. Let's come back to source attributes, destination attributes. And now what I need to do is I need to say that if the number of attributes has changed, so how do I get the number of attributes? Is there such a thing as length on an object? Like if I do x colon 42 dot length, no. But I can probably do object dot keys of that dot length. Yeah. source keys is going to be object.keys, .entries. I'm going to do entries. Source attributes, source entries. Okay, repeat that. So the best way of doing this is just if the number of attributes has changed, then obviously they are different. So if source attributes.length not equal to destination attributes.length, return they have changed. Otherwise, I'm just going to do this as a reduce. There's my understanding of equality in JavaScript isn't particularly good. Like for example, I'm pretty sure that if I do x is equal to a colon 42, 3, okay, I did 43, and y is going to be a colon 43, then x equal to y, it says false, right? So they're not the same object, so it considers them as different. So what I need to be doing is I need to be checking each of the entries and making sure that its key is the same and its value is the same. So I can do that with reduce. We're just going to say result, comma, entry. But in here, we're going to start with false. Oh no, they're going to start out as the same. And I can say in here that if entry is going to be key, comma, value. But if the key, no, if value is not equal to DST entries key, no, DST attributes. So what I'm doing is I'm just saying for each item in the source attributes, grab its key and its value. If its value is not the same as the destination value for that key, or if we've already found one that doesn't match, then return false. Otherwise, return true. I could have written that a bit more efficiently because this is going to go and search through. It's never going to exit early. There's a dodgy trick you can do with here where I can do like I, comma, array. And you can actually, if you truncate the array, then, so I can do array dot slice is a dodgy hack, but I'm just going to cut off all the items that it hasn't processed. I said I wasn't going to do this, but might as well. Start is 0. End is going to be I. There we go. So this is just going to cut off any other elements in the array to stop them from being processed, and then it's going to return false. And then in here, has it changed? Return not that. Dodgy, dodgy, dodgy. All right. I don't even know if this is going to work. It doesn't feel right. Have I got my booleans around the right way? This is saying if they're different, it'll return false. Means this will return true. So if they're different, we'll return true. Attributes are changed. That's correct. If everything's the same, we'll return true. Otherwise, well, that'll make us return false. Okay, yep. I believe this will work. This is hacky code. It'll work. Starting to lose my voice. So where was I? Attributes change. Only if the attributes change will we do that. Okay. I reckon this test should now pass. Well, unless I crash or something. No, passed. Excellent. That one's already passed. This one, because I fixed the same bug, this one should pass as well. I haven't changed any of the code around transforms. Excellent. This one is going to be exercising some new code. So this one hopefully passes, but wouldn't be betting anything on it. No, there we go. Oh yeah, here we go. I am not sure. Oh, this is an issue in the way that I generate the. This is definitely a bug. When I generate these diffs, I am passing through. Where is it? Where do I pass through the attributes? I'm just passing through the attributes directly, but my protobuf format, if I can find my protobuf format, it's actually expecting these not to be an object, but a list of these key value pairs. So back in here, I need to change this to an object dot entries dot map key value once you publish the game, you'll tell us the name of the game. That sounds like a good incentive. How far through your game do you reckon you are, a random guy? How far through your game development do you reckon you are? I know it's always a hard question. It's like, how long's a piece of string? Oh, nice. I quite like when the chapters are done with the storytelling type games. Like uh I think Walking Dead did it in one of their games. And it's also been done in, well, survival crafting games. I guess there's always The Long Dark also did it as chapters, which I thought was quite well done as well. What was the other? There was another really big game. It was a story game, similar to The Walking Dead. I'm gonna quickly look for that. Um, no, I don't remember the name of it. There was a game. The main character was a girl and like a high school girl, and um, I don't know if I'm giving anything away. She took photos and was able to had a magical power related to taking photos. They were quite a successful game. Can't remember what it was called though. But that was another good episodic game. Okay, somewhere in here, I will have. Here we go. My datagram generator was already doing this. Grab that. Put that in there. So we've got the attribute field for value. Here, attribute field for value. That's name. No, that needs to be value. And then I need to get the actual value for that one. Let's see where that's used. Oh no, we just pass the value through directly. Okay. It's copying my existing code. Yeah, I mean, you need to be able to make money, a random guy. I mean, you don't. A lot of people are obviously doing this as a hobby, but even if you're doing it as a hobby, I think everyone's dream is to kind of make it as a game developer. And if you're always giving stuff away for free, then yeah, it's pretty difficult to know how good your game is, I guess. Doesn't like attributes. Ah, yeah. Uh, Turn that as component attribute. Proto dot component attribute. Oh, right. The guy on Twitch, Dota2, what's his name, might not like what I'm about to do here. Let's do a dodgy cast. Dota2 attitude it was, yeah. It'll crash if that cast is invalid, and we'll know pretty soon. Apply delta. Oh, wow. This is all wrong. This has been refactored. This can literally become that equals award, though. I think. Yeah. Yeah, it's a common thing in business, a random guy, that one of the first things that you learn if you go through like an accelerator program, a startup accelerator program, is you can ask 1,000 people if they'd pay you for something, and 10% of them might say yes, I'd definitely pay for that. But until somebody's actually put cash in your hand, you haven't validated that people will actually pay you for it. People will say they'll pay for stuff that they won't. So yeah, I'd recommend charging, even if it's just a little bit. Okay. Add component. Is this one going to work now? I doubt it. Yay! Another working test. Okay, how long have I been streaming? 3¼ hours. I'll go a little bit longer. Try and get some more tests done. I'll get these tests out of the way. I think I will stream tomorrow. What I might do, because I'm starting to feel pretty confident about this, is I might work on my devlog, my next devlog, even though this code is for the next devlog. I might work on my next devlog this afternoon and then continue this code on stream tomorrow. But I'll keep going with these tests. I've got to head off at in about half an hour to sort out some non-game development things. Okay, let's get similar code to that. Remove components. So we're going to do that, generate our entities. I am going to do component, e2.components is just going to be an empty list though. So we're going to actually take out that component that was on there. And then I'm going to make sure that instead of this stuff's all the same, that this is going to be a delete. I'm expecting a delete request to come through with an empty type, no attributes, and an empty idempotence key. Run that test. That fails. Yep, that one has to pull that out of E1. Leave a model for turning off and on the lights. Didn't work for like 40 minutes. Oh yeah, that should be a 0. Run the test again, and yay, another passing test. This is the best part of unit testing, is once you've gotten rid of the worst of the bugs, quite often your tests just fall over one after the other. So next, I am going to do what's my next one? The remove component, adding an attribute, removing an attribute, and changing an attribute. These are going to be really similar. They're going to be most similar to this code here. So I'm going to copy that out. But what I'm going to do is, rather than adding a new component, I am going to do components 0 dot attributes dot foo is going to be equal to 42. Probably need lots of extra question marks. Oh wow. That's not what I wanted. Let's undo all of that. Let's try that. No, this is what I decided was not allowed. I'm a bit confused as to why that's not legal. All right, that's dodgy, but I'm only writing a test. All I'm trying to do is add an attribute called foo. We get the delta. I'm expecting an update. This one should be, we're going to modify component 0. Component ID, we're expecting an update, but we're expecting this to also have a name, which is foo, a string value, which is undefined, a float value. I think that's going to come up as a float value just because of the way I'm representing these things. Undefined int value, undefined. Is that going to work? I've got to admit, I'm not sure how the float values get interpreted. It received an undefined. That is not what I wanted. Okay. Let's try debugging this one. It's possible that my method to determine if attributes have been updated is not correct. So E2, well, E1 has a single component whose attributes are just value. Oh, sorry, comp. What's comp? What? Oh, sorry, it's key equals value. That's a. I thought that I made the attribute hello world. Nope, I made it key comma value. Cool. So that's correct. And then I've got my E2. It also should have a single component who should have 2 attributes. It does. Key value and foo42. But my diff code is apparently returning undefined. So I come down into this test, find where I'm doing the diff, which is just here. Oh, I'm already stopped there. So it should be going, nothing's changed except for the components. So I step in to generate component diffs. I'm expecting it to generate a diff here. And that's fine. We generate the existence map, which should have a single item in it, which is equal to true, true. There is my single item, which is, destination exists is false. Oh, because I haven't processed the destination queue. There we go, single item, true, true. So then what we should do is we should come down into this loop. Our IDs should be equal because we haven't added or removed any components. But then attributes changed. I'm expecting this to be true. I believe the attributes have changed. Let me just eyeball this code. The lengths are not equal. Then we should return true. Let's just step through to here. Source entries. This is meant to be source attributes. There we go. And destination, sorry, entries, source entries and destination entries. Okay, let's give this a go. Come back here, run this. Yeah, okay, so it's come through as an integer. I'm not sure what the correct behavior is there, so I'm just going to roll with it. Int value. Problem is these need to be longs. This will definitely have a bug. Would I use Unreal Engine if Unity permanently shut down? Yeah, possibly. I would probably just do a quick review for whether or not my whether or not I'd be using Unreal or Godot. And in fact, if I were to have my time again, I'd probably do that. I'd probably spend a bit more time looking at that anyway. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure which engine would be better for me. Yeah, 42 dot as long. I need to convert this to a long dot from value 42. Yeah, I'll import long from long. Probably need to set up a sound effect or something. I don't know how to do it so that I can actually hear when new messages come through. So my chat is over on my other screen. I can't see the chat that you guys can. That's being done by OBS. Yeah, I should set up a sound effect. So I don't think this test will work because I don't think that I'm correctly kind of marshalling the long. And yeah, sure enough, this is coming through as that. So I think what I will actually do here is I think this is a bug in my generate delta. When I go and create that, yeah, this is wrong. This should actually be treating even numbers like 42 as floats. Whereas what I want to do in here is if value instance of long, import long from long. In that case, I will return int value. This is the convention I've used elsewhere. Once numbers start getting big, JavaScript is terrible at storing them. So if I want to store exact integer values, then I store them as a long, which can store large values. Otherwise, I treat them as a float. This is all fine. So this is actually going to be undefined. This one is going to become 42. And then hopefully this will pass now. No. Okay. Oh yeah, that's a mistake. This shouldn't be hello world. This should be key. And this one should be value. That's my misremembering what my test was doing. Still not quite there. Value. Don't need these. This is all absolutely fine. No, okay. So it should be sending those through, but what I need to do is I need to change that other code to, where do I use that? That's down in here. I need to default each of those. So string value needs to be undefined. Float value is undefined. Full value? Full value is undefined. And lastly, string value is undefined. And then override the whole thing with str value. Yeah. And then it overrides one of them with an actual value. That was another legitimate bug. Like finding legitimate bugs makes it feel like this testing time is worth it. Expected 3, received 3. Oh no, I see. No, so it shouldn't be str value. It should be string value. String value. I don't like that. Oh, because I've already done that. Int value. Okay. Taking bets. I reckon this is going to pass. Yep, that's fine. Is indeed meant to be comp. This time for sure. There we go. All right, 2 more tests. I can do this. I can do this. Then, once I've got these 2 last tests done, I am going to finish up, go sort out these other things I need to sort out. Okay. This is my first game, Random Go. So while I don't have much experience with game development, I've got a lot of software development experience under my belt. So I've got, it's 22 years of full-time software development experience. And I've got a computer science degree, which is all very helpful for doing things like knowing how an MMO server should work, although a lot of people disagree with me on that. Time will tell if I'm right on this stuff or not. And I've been running my own businesses for a few years now, so I've got an okay handling of the business side of things as well. So we delete the attributes.key. I would not recommend that people do a game this big as their first game. It's like the first thing they teach you when you're starting a business is that you should always validate everything. And I mean, I mentioned in a stream a couple of days ago, maybe, that one thing I do regret about my current work on my game is that I ported this across to be client server so early. I should have been putting my effort into testing my first gameplay loop, because it would have been a lot easier just to implement all the, the troll movement and all that kind of stuff, doing that all client side, and then I could validate whether or not this game had any chance of being successful. Whereas by putting so much effort into all of this networking code, it's potentially lost work if the gameplay loops are not engaging, and if there's just no way of recovering them. So that was a bit of a stupid mistake on my part. But the benefit of doing something like this as a hobby is it just doesn't matter so much. Let's make this a long... It's your first game. I mean, as long as you're enjoying yourself, I don't see any harm in it. As long as you've set your expectations and you're willing to accept that the game could just be a hobby. Because until you're testing things with actual customers, you just have no idea if something's going to work or not. Earlier in my career, my software development career, I was quite convinced that, developers knew what users wanted, but developers don't know what users want. Okay, so in here I'm going to do an undefined. Oh no, hang on, let's get rid of this attribute entirely. And I've just made it so that key will now be 42. And int value is going to be a long dot value of from value 42. Yeah, determined to at least do something per day. On a large project, one of the most difficult things for a hobby is staying motivated. And yeah, just making sure you do a little bit every now and then is a great way of doing it. It's why I started this devlog was to stay motivated. And I have to admit that I had a couple of bad episodes of my devlog where I wasn't getting all that many views, and I got a little bit bummed out and demotivated, and decided the best way to stay motivated was going to be to start up this stream. So people talk about all the search engine optimization side of that the streams might be doing damage to the brand, and don't really care. The whole point of this YouTube channel is just to keep me motivated, share what I'm doing with other people, because I'm learning a lot along the way. And I think a lot of the experience I've picked up over the many years I've been a software developer is hopefully useful to other people. So an opportunity to give things back as well. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with hoping to make money out of something like game development. It's a lot of time you put into it. And the joy of game development isn't so much in cutting code, it's in having, or even in producing something that you think looks pretty. It's in bringing joy, I think, to other people. So there's definitely an incentive to have your game be successful. And as I said before, all hobby game developers would love to do this for a living. All right, so my tests all pass now. And I've even tested separately that strings, integers, floats all get passed through properly. I haven't tested booleans, but I'm very confident they'll work. I am going to have to finish up my stream here, though. I will be kicking off tomorrow's stream with integrating this into my existing UDP transmitter. I'm expecting that to be a pretty small operation. What I haven't done yet is I haven't actually written the code that kind of calls into this generate delta. So it needs to go off and look and, oh, maybe I did do that. We'll find out tomorrow. So thank you everyone for joining me. We've got 3 people on YouTube and 1 on Twitter at the moment. 1 on Twitch, not Twitter. Be sure to subscribe to me on YouTube if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitch. And until tomorrow, catch you all around.